Welcome back to the Heart of Hunting. I'm Gunner.
And I'm Sean. This year for our 2017 archery hunt, we drew our deer tags for our unit. We picked up some over-the-counter elk, either sex, archery tags, and headed up to our unit. We tried to hunt every weekend, and the first weekend we went up there, we checked our game cameras that we set up in July, and we had a lot of animals on there. We had some bear. We had a lot of deer this year. Got almost to our area when a cow almost busted us. She didn't know what we were, but she didn't see us completely, so we kind of got stuck in this area, and we just sat there for hours because it was just a stare down. She started barking at us, and she was 80 yards away, and she moved into about 40, and we had a spike run through. And they were just up there grazing where we go, and we hunkered down for a long time. She kept barking and barking and barking at us, and a lot of the elk will bark at you if they don't know what you are and they want you to show yourself, or a distress call, or if there's danger. So on opening day, we didn't see a lot of animals. We seen a doe that bedded down about 10 yards in front of us, so we waited to see if anything else would come through, and there was nothing. So we packed up and went home and reset the game cameras and came back the next weekend, and I'll let Gunner tell you about that.
We decided to head around the mountain to another game camera of ours and decided to sit there. And on the way to the game camera, we busted up some nice bucks, some real nice bucks.
We didn't have a clear shot. They seen us before we seen them. They jumped right up, full velvet, beautiful deer, and they were gone. As soon as we seen them, that's how fast they were gone. Where we hunt, you'll see in some of the video how thick the aspens are. It's just like lodgepole aspens, and a lot of sucker aspens that are just growing up all over the place. So anyway, the deer jump up, and we end up heading down the trail to our spot.
And we get to our game camera, checked it, saw some elk, same thing, 3 and 4 in the morning. And then we headed up the hill about 30 yards and sat there in some thicker aspens and some evergreens. And we sat there for hours, and around 11:30 I looked up. Then all of a sudden I see a big old cow elk coming in at 40 yards. So I looked back at my dad, and we knew it was on, so I stood up as slow as I can so she didn't see me and went full draw, and at 43 yards I had a small window through the aspens, and I took the shot and ended up hitting her.
one of the biggest cows I've ever seen. I told Gunner to wait where he shot from because it's so thick in there that I needed him to show me where his window was. So I walked down so we could have a line of sight, start glassing downhill, and sure enough, here's this big elk, probably another 30 to 35 yards, just piled up on this deadfall.
Just behind us, and I was sitting there for about 2 hours, and around 11:30 I looked up and I ranged her at 40 yards, and I drew back and had just a slight window to shoot through, and I managed to get a good shot and hit her right there, so I'm gonna go look at her.
We end up going back up the next weekend, and we go the same route every time. We get up to our spot, start glassing, and we see a couple big bucks across the deadfall, right where we always stop, just to make sure so we're not trudging through. And we nicknamed these bucks the big buck and the bigger buck, and they don't hang with any of the other smaller bucks, but even the smaller bucks were big bucks. But the big buck and the bigger buck were big bucks. We're talking maybe 170, 180 bucks. Muleys up there, and they're thick bladed horns. So we follow them into this dense, thick aspen grove. and they don't see us, they don't hear us. We're creeping in there. Then we locate some deer, and then it goes into a stare down. They see us, but they're not sure again what we are. And you'll see on the footage, this young deer comes all the way down to about maybe 15, 20 yards, just checking us out. And we're just standing there and standing there and standing there, because there's like 7 or 8 bucks above us. And it's just so painful, because you're starting to cramp up, your legs are shaking, you can't move. You don't want to move too fast. You can't kneel down. And you're just in this staring game with them until they move on. Well, all the bucks started moving on to go graze. And I knew they were going to come back into bed. So we stayed in there and found a spot. And we usually clear out a good spot where we sit, because it's just so noisy in there with the sticks and the shrubs and everything else. So we clear out a good spot. And we're glassing around for a couple hours, and then we sit down and just get ready. And sure enough, I didn't even hear him come in, but 5 yards to my left, here's the big buck standing there. And my bow is just arm's length. I couldn't move anyway because he was just standing right there. He looks over at us and then just meanders up the hill about another 40 yards and beds down. So we get a bead on him, we see antlers, then we see another set of antlers. It's the big buck and the bigger buck. So at this point, I decide I'm going to put a stalk on these bucks. So I take my shoes off, my boots off, and I start stalking these bucks in my socks. And they get up and they just start feeding, and I'm just trailing right behind them, 40 yards, 40 yards, 40 yards. So I finally get to a point where I can shoot the big buck. So I draw back. And I had such buck fever that I was counting my pins 10, 20, 30, 40. That's not how I do it. I don't know what I was thinking. It's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So I actually shot over the buck with my 50-yard pin because I calculated it wrong. Oh, so sickening. Shot right over his back. They ran like a bat out of hell. We didn't see him for a while. The rest of the day we didn't see him. Totally discouraged. You know, I'm thinking maybe I'll find some blood. I knew I was dead on that buck when I shot. The only thing was I was dead on right over his back. Couldn't find my arrow, so of course I knew I launched it way over him. So we start walking back out, call it a weekend, and as we're walking back out, we see the sticker buck. We see this buck we named Krusty. He's like a real tall 2x3 with all this funky junk knot all up front here. And a couple other smaller bucks with him. And of course, we weren't paying attention, which we should have been. They busted us, jumped up, and ran down the hill, so we didn't have a chance at them. So we just called it an evening, walked out, went home. So the next weekend, actually it's the last weekend of archery season. We're thinking we need to fill 2 deer tags, bucks. We need to fill another elk tag, bull or a cow. 6:55 a.m. we get to our spot where the deadfall meadow is every time. We're looking for deer at this point because we haven't seen the elk in the last couple weekends. I don't know where they went. We haven't seen them. We only heard a few bugles at the beginning of the season. They weren't hard bugles, but there was some bugles, maybe 2 small bulls bugling back and forth. They wouldn't come to our cow calls, they wouldn't come to any bugles, and we just couldn't get back into the elk. So we're figuring, well, it's time to get a deer. Yeah. We were on the deer the weekend before. There's deer everywhere up there. So we're looking for deer at this point. 6:55 a.m. we get up there and I'm glassing, and there's a small 4x4 bull standing in the deadfall eating 80 yards away, maybe 84 yards away as I think I ranged it. And I tell Gunnar, there's a bull out there, and he's like, no way. And I'm like, yeah, dude, there's a bull out there. So we didn't have time to set up, nothing. I knocked an arrow, I turned the GoPros on, we waited for him to come. The wind was perfect. I mean, this guy came in on a string. I mean, he came straight to us, and I just let him, kept coming. He just kept coming. 80 yards, 70 yards, 40 yards, 30 yards, 20 yards. He got to 17 yards, turned broadside, started walking broadside up the hill, and I just nail him with an arrow at 17 yards. I see the arrow go in. I see the blood start to flow. I'm thinking, I got a killer shot. I almost knocked this thing over. He rears up, falls back, turns around, runs right next to us. You can see the arrow sticking in him. So I arrow this elk at 17 yards. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. It's my first bull with a bow. A bull. I got my cow in 2012, I think. Mm-hmm. But this would be my first bull with a bow. 17 yards. You couldn't have asked for anything better. It came in on a string. It was like watching somebody else's video, because you watch so many videos throughout the year and you see everybody else getting them. Well, it was our turn, and it worked out perfect. It was magic. He came right in. I arrowed him at 17 yards. You could see the fletching sticking out of him that much. It didn't pass through, but it went all the way in. It's a 28-inch arrow. watch him run. He turns. We see the arrow. He runs down about 100 yards into the deadfall. You can see him plain as day. He beds down. So we're thinking, yes, score. So we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And we're looking at him through the binoculars, and he's just bedded looking around. Hour went by, still looking around. 2 hours went by, still looking around. Started getting worried at this point. He should have expired by 30 minutes. I mean, I hit him right in the breadbasket.
Right behind the shoulder.
And I see some deer coming up below him. The same deer. It was Krusty, it was the sticker, it was the big buck and the bigger buck. And he hears them and he's not sure, so he stands up. And he's really wobbly, so I'm thinking, this guy has got to go down. This bull has got to go down. He doesn't go down. He takes small steps and he's stepping over logs. And I wait for the deer to pass by. He beds back down. And I told myself, I got to go get him. I got to get down there and sneak on him and get this bull. So as I'm sneaking down, he gets up and he starts walking into the thick, darker timber. And I lose him. Then I'm thinking, well, instead of pushing him, I'll let him lie. So I immediately turned my attention to the deer because they bedded down right next to me. Another 40 yards. So I'm crawling on my hands and knees. And I've got my choice of the sticker buck, the big buck, and the bigger buck. And I'm going for the bigger buck. So I crawl 40 yards, hands and knees. I stand up, I come to full draw. As soon as I come to full draw and step out, they stand up and run. They didn't even wait for me. They didn't even turn broadside to even give me a second of a shot, and they were gone. And I'm thinking, okay, cool, whatever. We got an elk down. So after the deer blow out of the area, I'm thinking that's okay, cool, whatever. We got a bull. I'm confident we got this bull because I hit him right in the breadbasket. He's got to be probably 60 yards from me. This time we turn our attention back to the bull, and we're thinking it's 4 hours now. He's got to be dead. He's got to be dead. And by that time, I had called my buddy Jordan, who came with us on Gunner's hunt, and he came up there with his son, and we were like, sweet, we got some people to help us pack this bull out. So we all gather up, we start looking at the blood trail. From where I shot the bull, when he turned and reared up, ran next to us, the swath of blood for 100 yards was this thick.
Huge.
I mean, I shot him with a Rage chisel tip. The swath was this big. When he stood there to look at us, you could see the arrow sticking out of him, and all down his leg, front leg was just full of blood. And then there was just a swath wherever he ran and rubbed up against. There was just blood everywhere. So we're like, right on. Here's the arrow. This much broke out of him. So there's probably another, gosh, I don't know, that much left in him. So we found the arrow. We start looking for the bull. I jump him right at about 15 yards from where we were. He jumped up and took off.
And this is after 4 hours.
This is after 4 hours. So he jumped up and took off. And I'm thinking, my gosh, man, what happened? And I'm trying to replay the shot in my mind. And every time I listen to the hit, I see the hit, we're following the blood. He's got to be dead. He's got to be down. Well, I jumped him, and he ran. We never seen him again. 3 days. We looked for him for 3 days.
3 days straight.
You'll see on the video the blood trail and the blood that we got from this bull. It made me sick that we couldn't recover him. We did everything we possibly could to try to find this bull. We stayed up there till it got dark. We marked every piece of blood that we found. We got on our hands and knees and crawled
For hours.
for hours. We found the blood from when I jumped him. He jumped and ran. I seen which way he ran. So we're at this point now, we're following fresh tracks because the blood stopped after that. You could see where he was laying, pulled up, coagulated. So he stopped the blood somehow. So we're on our hands and knees, and we're trying to find fresh tracks versus old tracks, trying to find spots of blood. We find a spot of blood probably the size of a pea. And the only reason we found it is because he had to jump over a downed aspen. And the downed aspen had a freshly broken branch off of it that was about this thick and about that long. So I picked up the branch and I'm turning and looking at it. And there's just a spot of blood. So that was the last blood we found. Tied a marker on that, and we decided to figure out. We went all the way down to the open meadow. Nothing to the open meadow. Came straight back to the blood. Went all the way back down. And we did this back and forth, probably for a couple miles. Then we would walk around the mountain. Nothing. Came back up the next day, did it all over again, marked everything. We couldn't find him. We don't know what happened. The only thing I think that could have happened is it glanced off a rib. I one-lunged him, and he got away. Because if I would have got both lungs, he would have been dead in 30 minutes. So that was our season. It was crazy. It was hectic. It was successful. It was disappointing. It was bittersweet. It was everything all rolled into one because we were on the animal. We shot at animals. We got animals. And it was crazy.
It was.
Absolutely crazy. Had a good time. There's still a big bull up there. You'll see him on the game camera. He's huge.
He's really big.
Big bull. We got him on the camera the night after Gunner got his cow. This big bull came through the same area that his cow came through.
Same exact trail.
Same trail, same everything. And he stayed quiet because we never heard of him.
Nope.
Or heard from him.
We never even seen him besides the game cameras.
Yeah, we've never seen it. We've seen the smaller bulls because we got them on our cameras. Yep. Last day, we're thinking we got this bull in the bag. He's coming right to us. So we fed the bears, fed the mountain lions, the bobcats, and the birds. So now it's on antelope. October, Colorado, 2017. We go out east. And stay tuned for that.